Well, good morning, and thank you, Farah. I'm not sure that I completely recognized myself from that introduction. I didn't realize you were taking notes when I was giving you all those things about myself. And by the way, for those of you worried, the ventilation system in the Royal Albert Hall is a heck of a lot better than it was. And I wasn't around in 1870 when it was first designed. If I can figure out how this technology works, there's always a bit of a challenge. Right, this is a bit of a meaty subject, and you might be wondering why a building engineer is talking to you about transportation infrastructure, particularly when Arup has such a thorough pedigree in the subject, and there's some tremendous expertise, some of which I'm glad to say is actually sitting in this room today. So hopefully, chaps, if I make a complete hash of this, you'll stand up and bail me out. But this is partly about a personal journey into the exciting and, should I say, sometimes bewildering world of transportation. How did I get involved in the first place? Well, probably because I was a bit slow in ducking, which is the first time round. And as you know, that once you have the word rail on your CV, you're going to be in demand to get that all-elusive score from Crossrail and also, these days, HS2. But for me, the main reason that I got involved in it is the exciting projects. Projects are immensely satisfying. The sheer scale and multidisciplinary input provides a tremendous opportunity to realize Arup's aspirations for total design. The fact that these projects can have a serious impact on our cities is also part of the attraction. Of course, once you have entered into the arcane world of transportation and railway engineering, you will have the ability to converse in a strange jargon that nobody else will understand. You maybe even have the ability to talk at length about the history of the Class 14E electric locomotive, and you possibly may have been presented with a set of railway curves. Although Colin Stewart, our high-speed rail person, tells me that the railway curves for high-speed rail are almost a straight edge. So maybe that part of it is slightly different. We also do aviation in the group, and I'm pleased to say that it's no different, just higher, faster, and of course far less sustainable. Jargon is slightly different, the acronyms are different, but they in fact mean the same thing. Railway stations, as Richard Matthews pointed out, a bit like, or major railway stations, that is, are a bit like airport terminals. The only difference is in railway stations, they park the vehicles inside. So, why do we do it? You need to have immense stamina and patience. And I must confess to a few momentary lapses of concentration during one of those exciting all-day workshops on the assurance management plan. Projects also take a heck of a long time. Crossrail Canary Wharf, which Farah kindly mentioned, started on the site in 2008 and will only be operational in 2018. We are miles ahead of the rest. I remember Roger Hawkins telling me that shortly after we were appointed on Tottenham Court Road 4 years ago, that he won his first TCR commission the year his son was born, and that his son was now at university. Well, the good news, Roger, is that we only have another 6 years or so to go, inshallah. Whole time there for the next generation. Transportation has been enjoying a bit of a renaissance here in the world. British engineers and architects are in demand and are sought after and have created some exciting projects. The sector has been remarkably resilient and has served us well during one of the worst recessions that we have ever seen. In fact, the Arup global transportation business, by whichever way you count it, accounts to about 25% of the firm. So a significant part of what we do and vitally important to us. But it's not just all about numbers. The projects are exciting and accessible in a way that makes them very different to others. And of course, you get to play with a full-size railway. In my case, I can talk to my family about King's Cross. They know what I'm talking about, and it's not some anonymous project hidden behind some corporate barrier, but something that people are familiar with, use, have an opinion on, and also rather frighteningly will be around for a long time. The day King's Cross opened, we had some tremendous praise from David Cameron, but I'm not going to embarrass my poor mother, who would be turning up in her grave if I was to cite the praise of a Tory Prime Minister for my work. Well, the proposition today is transport an effective and efficient enabler for urban regeneration. I'm not sure that anybody here would necessarily choose to disagree. Capital programs create the broader context for the transformation which goes beyond pure business case economics. But cities are defined by the way they connect to the outside world. The extrovert city will attract people and commerce and will likely thrive. Transport will be an essential part of their success. Successful cities will have the political will together with a strong vision to invest in major infrastructure. This will be shaped by the aspirations of their people. This city is what it is because our citizens are what they are. And I think this is as true today as it was when Plato first penned these words, or squirrel, whatever he did with them, chisel them out on a rock. Look at, if we just sort of take a slight trip through what defines cities. If we look at Ephesus, a thriving city on the eastern Mediterranean that was the center of commerce for over 1,000 years. Its success owed much to its position and its natural, safe harbor. But eventually the years of war and occupation took its toll. I guess its citizens got a bit tired, its natural harbor silted up, and its influence waned until eventually it became the ruin that it is today. Samarkand on the Silk Road marked the boundary between East and West, an evocative and exotic place defined by its position on the crossroads of the great trade route. Eventually it fell into decline as the sea routes to the east opened up and the journey became easier. And I guess part of that was having to pay less tax. Circumstances will change and cities need to adapt to remain successful. You can see this in Venice, which was the ultimate trading power of its day. At its height, it had a merchant fleet of over 3,000 ships. But today, Venice has declined, or perhaps the word is sunk, to be no more than a museum with 60 or so thousand remaining Venetians reduced to serving the millions of tourists that visit each year. A wonderful place, but not what it was. Genoa was another great city-state built on trade, perhaps not as illustrious as Venice, but it has managed to survive as a major port to this day. Its citizens were able to react to changing circumstances, and its luck of geography and perhaps its rather over-enthusiastic embracing of the slave trade maintained its viability while Venice declined. Well, what defines a modern city? Stability, social cohesion, civic pride, prosperity, or perhaps a combination of all of these. But perhaps, most importantly, transportation is what makes the modern city work. Forward-looking cities will recognize that transport infrastructure is an essential ingredient for success. For example, in Singapore, private sector investments in projects such as Marina Bay is matched by an investment in infrastructure to fuel expansion. Singapore have a tremendous program of metro expansion, which is keeping an Arup office of over 300 incredibly busy. Shanghai is spending billions on infrastructure, matched by cities such as Hong Kong, which have the energy and enthusiasm to develop major projects, and they have an interesting public-private commercial model that seems to work. Closer to home in the Middle East, there are massive ambitions with a much vaunted plan to spend over 100 billion on transportation projects. My wish is that they would perhaps divert a little bit of that money to pay their consultants for work that they've done in some of these schemes. But nonetheless, some tremendous opportunities. The new terminal at Kuwait is one of these and is an example of how the aviation sector in the region is enthusiastically expanding to challenge the established status quo. In Qatar, a new metro has been constructed for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. As a frequent visitor to Qatar, and having experienced the ferocious heat, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but my sports colleagues assure me that they have a cunning plan, possibly to move Qatar further north. To function effectively, cities need to be connected with each other. Transport can also help to define the success of a city. Good transport surely must be one of the essential ingredients. And what defines good transport? Well, it should be easy to use, inexpensive, reliable, and integrated. I wonder how London compares on the inexpensive stakes, with £4.30 being the cheapest Zone 1 single tube fare. Transport can also help to define the identity of a city, and it can be fun. The Sydney Opera House, the Sydney Harbour Ferry is a great way to see the city, and of course the Opera House. And indeed, they are very much part of the integrated transport network of Sydney. The cable cars in San Francisco are very much part of the identity of the city. These days, no more than a tourist attraction, but nevertheless very much part of what San Francisco is all about. By the way, if you are in San Francisco, go to the Cable Car Museum. It's well worth a visit to see how they kind of winch these things around the city. Yes, I know, getting a bit too nerdy on railway stuff there. London has its version with Wilkinson Air's cable car, which I'm sure will become a much loved addition to the city. Take a ride, or perhaps it's a flight, and you'll get a great view of London Docklands and also Siemens Crystal. I wonder who the designers of Siemens Crystal were. Well, maybe that was the idea in the first place. Dakar in Bangladesh has the bicycle rickshaw, which must be classified as one of the best integrated and sustainable transport systems in the world. It looks like a tough way to earn a living, though. Closer to home, we have the Heathrow PRT. I wonder who comes up with these acronyms, or Personal Rapid Transit. This is a great funky little vehicle developed jointly by Arup and Bristol University, which takes you from the car park, the business car park at T5 to the terminal. This is a great fun thing to do, so if you haven't, go and have a ride. It's actually a lot of fun. Innovative transport such as Shanghai, maglev offer exciting new options, but questions remain about the economic viability. High-speed rail is becoming a genuine alternative to short-haul air travel, and perhaps even further afield as design speeds are now 400 kilometers per hour, which is the design speed for HS2. Can we go any faster? Wow. I was intrigued recently to read that Google, our friends at Google, have developed the driverless car. This is not a joke. Apparently, they're already clocked up over 300,000 driverless miles, and this vehicle will be licensed on the streets of the roads of California from 2015. So I guess that solves the designated driver problem, doesn't it? Perhaps, though, the biggest advance in transport will be by better communication. Either being able to better manage transport supply and demand through improved use of data, or maybe we'll all just stay at home. Interesting thought. We're now in theory able to get real-time live information on the best travel options personalized for our own preferences. Well, maybe not quite yet. I've got a phone that talks to me. It is a one-way conversation at the moment. I don't think it understands my South African accent. But I'm still not able to get information, real-time information on the train that I'm actually on and when it will arrive at its destination. When you finally can get onto the website 20 minutes later, you're rather unhelpfully told that you can't get information for journeys that started in the past. So perhaps encouraged there that our railway companies are actually forward-looking after all. But with operational information now freely available from sources such as London Data Store, the possibilities are endless. But infrastructure should evolve with the city. Creaking transport and overcrowding is a fact of life in many places. The Japanese Shinkansen, I think, has developed and evolved and is now one of the most successful high-speed networks in the world. But it's one of those things that the more you build, the more people that come and will use it. So perhaps slightly more challenging is how you deal with the transportation infrastructure in India. And one suspects that this will be an enormous challenge to meet the aspirations of the burgeoning population. America has its freeways, and those of you who've managed to spend several hours sitting in a 6-lane traffic jam on the LA freeways will know that this surely is unsustainable, and we can't go on like that. But looking closer to home, London as a world city. The growth in London in the 19th century has been closely linked with the expansion of the transportation network. At the time, London was a thriving, bustling city. The warehouses were full, and it was a fabulous place. But a burgeoning population led to an expanding city and an ever-increasing need to effectively and efficiently move goods around the city. So London is shaped by its transport, undoubtedly. The railways first came to London in 1838 with the opening of the Greenwich Railway, and this was soon followed by the construction of the terminus railway stations, which connected all parts of the city with London. These new stations were fitting gateways to the growing city and set a standard of design that will have the ability to evoke the excitement of arrival and departure, that still has the ability. The main line network was followed by a network of metropolitan railways that led to the rise of suburbia, from which middle-class and wealthy people commute to the centre. The irony is that the advent of the railways and the move to the suburbs led to socially deprived inner-city areas that are now benefiting from transport-led regeneration initiatives. The engineering of London's transport at the time was innovative and leading edge. By 1863, London had the world's first underground railway. Today, with over 270 stations and 250 miles of track, it is the second largest network in the world after Shanghai. The difference is Shanghai is still rapidly growing. We are growing too, but not as rapidly as Shanghai. The years of underinvestment have left their toll. This is a picture of Oxford Circus. And to illustrate the scale of the challenge, it's interesting just to look at some numbers. Oxford Circus has over 70 million entry and exits each year. So that if Oxford Circus were an airport, it would be second on the World League table. Perhaps this is the answer to overcrowding at Heathrow Airport. Or maybe it isn't. Heathrow Airport has a program of investment and work which will take years and years to realize. And we also sadly have the consequences of events such as King's Cross fire, which is the consequences of lack of investment in infrastructure. I was hearing this morning that there was a program on Sunday which would have been a useful tip for this presentation, where Eben Davis was saying that I think in 20 years' time we have to spend something like £500 billion in infrastructure in this country in order just to maintain the status quo. So never mind the tax cuts that have been spoken about at the moment. But I think that the advent of the last few decades have seen a new lease of life in transport. High Speed 1, or the opening of the Channel Tunnel in 1994, gave London a direct link to the continent. Although at first the image of a bright, shiny Eurostar meandering through the Kent countryside became a metaphor for lack of investment in infrastructure in Britain. And it wasn't until the completion of HS1 in 2007 that we finally became part of Europe's high-speed club. Arup's involvement in High Speed 1 dates back to 1989, when we proposed an alternative alignment approaching London from the east. This was a hard-fought battle, which was eventually won on the basis of the huge regeneration opportunities that would benefit areas of North Kent and London. It was also a key factor in bringing the Olympics to London. For me, the opening of St Pancras in 2007 created a new benchmark in station design. The railway station again became a destination in its own right, somewhere to enjoy visiting, and by that unique benchmark of measures of station success, somewhere where you can get a decent cup of coffee. You can also get a good meal and certainly the most expensive glass of champagne in London if you use the champagne bar. And the regeneration, the economic impacts of HS1 are significant, and we hope to achieve the same with HS2. So what next? Crossrail is on course for opening in 2018. And this has been a tremendous project for London. It's kept us busy while other sectors have suffered a downturn. And Thameslink is on programme to increase capacity in and out of London, opening in 2018. There's a lot going on in 2018. I wonder what we're going to do afterwards. This is all a bit like painting the Forth Bridge, though, because London's population is set to increase by over 1 million in the next 20 years, and London still remains an attractive place for people to come and work. We are now on with the planning of HS2 that will bring the next generation of high-speed rail to Britain. There are many challenges ahead, not the least creating a massive new railway station at Euston. I have every confidence that our team with HS2 and Grimshaw will develop a fine solution that will bring further benefits to the local community and to London as a whole, but many challenges ahead. Other railway schemes in the pipeline include Crossrail 2 and the Northern Line extension to Nine Elms. At the moment, these are lines on a map, but work is going ahead to further define. But of course, it's not just about rail. London's future depends on being able to retain its competitive position in the world. We need a transport strategy that's joined up by making the best use of existing infrastructure, but also by being courageous and having a strong vision. Maybe a new airport in the estuary isn't the answer. I know my aviation colleagues are skeptical about the viability, but nonetheless, we should be having the debate. I'm not sure, though, how the new airport might cope with climate change. Perhaps it'll become known as Boris Il Flottant. We did have a floating one a couple of weeks ago, actually, as I recall. Interesting challenge. My story today ends with King's Cross. It's been an immense privilege to have worked on this project for the last 5 years and to be able to parachute in at the end of the job and share in, bask, I think, in some of the glory. Full credit to John McAslan and Hero and his team and the Arup design team for keeping it together for over 15 years through the turmoil of changes in policy, privatizations, and all the other pitfalls that characterize public projects in this country. And also credit to Network Rail, who surprised themselves by creating something that the great Victorian railway companies would have been proud of. But the ultimate accolade for me is that my kids think it's great, and that makes me almost cool for a very short while. So London is unquestionably a world city, and I think the events in the summer of 2012 have demonstrated that to the world. We can be justifiably proud of what was achieved, even if we aren't allowed to talk about it. I was on pain of death here not to mention the word Olympics, and I think the low-cog police would be outside if I dared to take any credit. But we all know what we did, and didn't we do a great job? But we mustn't forget there was only a little over a year ago that we had rioting on the streets of London. If we are to continue to thrive and grow, we need investment in infrastructure that will provide the catalyst for regeneration while creating the transport links that our world city status befits. We're in a unique position in this room to help create that strong vision that will secure the future for London. Thank you very much.
It's hugely interesting. I think that infrastructure is probably one of the pressing issues for London. 1 million people extra in the capital by 2031. That's the equivalent of landing Birmingham in London by 2031. So it's a hugely interesting and challenging subject for us all. Just to leave a question, I mean, I've heard people say 434 million for King's Cross. You know, it's a lot of money. Could we have spent the money in a different way to get more of an impact on London? So I'll leave that as a challenging question to you.
I suppose one of the things that always interests me is how do you persuade politically people and parties to pursue infrastructure projects which the capital clearly needs if it's to grow. And if it grows, we make more money, we become more affluent, and people's lives can be improved. That's the theory. I think what fails to happen is that the story of London and the story of its need for infrastructure is not understood sufficiently widely, and people feel frightened about rapid growth. So there's always this big political problem around of how do you get the story across of what the city could be, and that to me is the job that politicians and planners are failing at, and that's why it takes so long to get infrastructure built. So it's really interesting to hear Mike talking about, you know, the effect of infrastructure on cities around the world. And that's what we need to happen in London. Instead of us just talking to ourselves as professionals about all these really fascinating examples and stories, somehow or other we need to provide people and their political representatives and the professionals who look after them with the means to tell that story and understand that story.
Okay, I thought it was an interesting topic, and I was just talking to Nigel about it and saying it does raise a lot of questions as to whether some of these infrastructure projects are larger than the appetite of the government in reality. The UK has got a pretty good track record of starting a lot of these projects, getting into concerns about the cost and the timing and then abandoning them. So I wonder about that. And I wonder whether, if it does go ahead as an HS2 project, what that does to the thoughts on the airport infrastructure. Because again, you've got a link which brings in Manchester, Birmingham and other areas, which may then negate the need for airport development in the immediate periphery of London. So I think the talk this morning brought a lot of those things forward, and great food for thought.
It was fantastic. Well, I actually work with Arup on a couple of the stations for Crossrail, so it was a fantastic insight. And I actually was watching this sort of Evan Davis program yesterday, which was all about infrastructure. And so it was fantastic just to see the projects that you're working on around London and also internationally. So it was a great insight. And I just think for an M&E engineer, he did a fantastic introduction, because he was looking at sort of like, I suppose, city planning and the implication of infrastructure on how cities sort of move, and also the implications on the economics of the city and how cities grow. And so it was fantastic.